Good morning. My name is Bill Campbell. I have the good fortune to serve as chair of the Tennessee Textbook and Instructional Materials Committee. Welcome one and all, both my fellow commission members and members of the staff that are here to support us. We're going to go ahead with the workshop side of our meeting, which gives us the opportunity to go over in detail with Allison and others all the materials that we'll be addressing when we have our formal meeting later in the morning. So welcome one and all. It's good to have representatives from the textbook companies with us and again members of the staff. I'm going to ask, and we'll start to my left, members of the commission and staff, just to introduce yourself, what you're calling, what you do, and identify, and members of the staff, why they're here and what they're doing on our behalf. So we'll start this way. And remember to push the button and always mention your name whenever you're speaking. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Nash, and I come from Henry County, from Paris, Tennessee. And this year I have changed jobs, and I am teaching inclusion grades kindergarten through 4th grade.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Reese, or Cruz is my maiden name. I got married last year. I am from Knoxville, and I teach high school special education.
Joanna Collins, staff attorney and director of contracts for Department of Education, and I am here to advise and support the commission.
Good morning, Delancia Davis, recording secretary, Tennessee Department of Education.
Good morning. I'm Vicki Kirk. I'm the Deputy Commissioner and Chief Academic Officer at the Department of Education, and I serve in Commissioner McQueen's stead.
Good morning. Susie Bunch. I'm Director of Schools in Lexington City. That's my job. You asked what my calling was. My calling was beach bum, but I don't think that's why I'm here today.
Kyle Mallory, Stewart County High School. Schools.
Bill Campbell. Now call on Allison Gower, our fearless leader, and she'll address the first item on the workshop agenda for reminders for all of us. Allison.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. I'm Allison Gower. I'm the Director of Content at the Tennessee Department of Education, and thank you for the compliment. We have the first tab in your binder has the Tennessee textbook adoption roles and responsibilities. We decided several meetings ago that we would use the first part of the agenda to review materials as kind of an ongoing training. And I just wanted to point a few things out to you. This document shows the role of the Assembly, the Governor, the State Board, the Commission itself, the advisory panels, the department, and the school districts. And it's just enumerated what each of those entities has as responsibility. Clearly, the work here is one of the important things is overseeing the programs, the materials bid for adoption, which then goes on to the State Board for final approval. And that is the majority of our work. The next page behind tab 1 has the policies regarding attendance and notice of meetings, live streaming, all of those things. I post those to the department's website so that there can be public viewing of any of these meetings. All of the materials are there. Obviously, we need 7 for a quorum, and it's important that you all attend as faithfully as you can. The following page talks specifically about the quorum. It's under section 8H in your materials. We have not had to deal with this, but section M regards electronic attendance, and we have to have a physical quorum in order for anyone to attend electronically. I just wanted to point that out. So we can't make quorum remotely. Section 1.4 talks about the rules of order for these meetings. meetings. If you look at Section A, any public member wanting to speak before the commission has to notify 15 business days prior to the meeting. We have, as such, had no request to speak for this meeting. And all of the subjects of the remarks must be confined to the business at hand and must be recognized by the chairman. The following pages are the actual Tennessee Code annotated dealing with the textbook commission. The first part talks about the makeup of the commission and each of the members and what their qualifications must be. Section I deals with the oath that you all took regarding conflicts of interest with publishers. Section M, again, is the legal note for the quorum. Section 7 deals with the videos that are streamed during these meetings and also archived. And those are just for your reference in case you need to look anything up in code. And of course, Joanna is here to help us through the sea of code. The next item is the substitution rule, and I'll give you a general summary of how this works. If publishers make changes to materials, they may request substitutions for items that appeared on the original approved list. The critical thing in those substitutions is that the materials must be able to be used side by side in the classroom. So in other words, the revised books cannot be so different that a teacher couldn't have the old book and the new book side by side. When those substitutions are submitted to the department, whatever subject matter they are submitted for, a content expert then reviews both the old edition and the new edition. And following the rule itself, you have the lists of the requests for substitutions that we'll be voting on later in the meeting. Tab 3 shows, and I just want to emphasize this one more time. If you look at the first page, Cycle 1, that shows you the link between standards adoption and the rest of the materials review and adoption process. So if you look at that first shaded column, you'll see that standards go to the state board, then the standards go to publishers. The publishers base the creation of their materials on those standards. Then we conduct the statewide review of the materials, then local adoption, then the contracts are established, and then the standards and the textbooks go into the districts. I mention this because it's a critical chain of events that cannot be unordered. Otherwise, the process falls apart. So I just, for you all, when you're back at your homes, I think this is an important document to share and help people understand. We've done a lot of training statewide on this and have tried to emphasize the importance of the schedule and how it all works. We are currently, for the work of the commission, we are in Section C, which, as you see, is science, PE, wellness, and health, fine arts, and some CTE courses. If you will turn to the second page, you'll see that by 2020, we should be living in a wonderful world in which the curriculum and instruction subjects and the CTE courses align. And if you just read through that second page, you'll see, for example, in Section B for the science adoption, those courses then for CTE mesh with science. And so it's an easier way for the districts to adopt and review. It's also, it allows for budgeting more easily because you've got a light year, 2 heavy years, a light year, 2 heavy years. So that's what we're working toward. I get questions a lot about that first page of, well, why are some things on a 5-year cycle, et cetera, et cetera. It's to bring everything back into alignment for page 2. And we can thank Dr. Shelton for her work on that, that schedule. The following page is the more granular timeline for Section C. So this is what we voted on in 2016. And again, just to emphasize, these timelines are critical because that's how the publishers develop materials, and they base everything that they do on this, and then our reviews, the establishing of the panels, all of that, critical things. And this Section C document just has more detail of what we're doing now. Following that, I wanted to show you all the application documents that we used to recruit panelists for this Section C review. We publicized more widely than we had in the past based on some recommendations from the Sunset hearing that we had. And these went out through all manner of social media. They were posted on the website. They went to listservs that were outside of the department. So we tried to have a robust dissemination of information. I'll point you to the components of the applications, letter of intent, practice exercise, and 2 letters of recommendation. Dr. Campbell was at the review of all of these panelist applications, and it's one of the highlights of my year to look through those. We have some really terrific teachers who apply to be on these panels, people from all over the state, and we will be approving the panelists later in the meeting. Following those application documents, there is the rubric that we used to score the applications. And then following that are the lists of panelists that you all will vote on in our meeting. So they're broken out by fine arts, science, CTE, and PE and wellness and health. Tab 4 contains the first document. Those are all of the categories that went out for bid this round for Section C. And you can see it is a lengthy list. Following that, I sent you all the actual bid documents electronically. As you know, they are notoriously difficult to read in printed form. So I've included a summary sheet in your binder that we'll talk about, but you do have those documents electronically, and they're posted to the website. As a matter of record, during the meeting, I'll need to read out the actual names of the publishers who bid and the numbers that they bid. One thing I'd also like to point out, I split the sheet so that you see in the first columns the intent to bid. We call for an intent to bid to get an idea of how many titles we might be looking at in terms of review. And when the intents came in, we had a total of 251 titles. Last year, I think we had about 77. So this adoption is exponentially larger than what we had last year, and that's also why we have many more panelists serving as reviewers this year. When the final bids came in, that number dropped to 179. That's not unusual, but I just wanted to point that out and explain what that sheet shows, and it shows the different categories that publishers bid in. The following tab, and Mr. Chairman, I would like for Joanna to talk about this. This is the publisher bid corrections policy. It's the following tab, 4A.
So as you will recall at our last meeting, we brought to your attention that the Office of Content and Assessment Design will often receive requests from publishers after the bid filing deadline to revise or correct their bids. And the revisions range from corrections of ISBNs to corrections of pricing. And so our office issued a memo to publishers participating in the CTE Section B adoption cycle, outlining some general guidance for how we would review those requests. And at the last meeting, I brought this to your attention and suggested that you formalize it into a policy in order to provide notice to publishers regarding how we will go about reviewing these requests, and in order to provide a consistent process for reviewing. And so that is what is in tab 4, is the policy that I drafted based on the guidance that we provided to publishers. And so the two main points are that substantive requests to change bids will not be considered. So any request to change the prices listed in the bid or requests to update the addition of the materials listed. But non-substantive requests will be considered on a case-by-case basis with the following general guidance. So the expectation is that these will be few and far in between, these requests. But in the event that there is some sort of error that needs to be corrected, we'll consider, incorrect category codes, ISBNs, course numbers, non-substantive requests. So.
What if a publisher wanted to lower the price?
So that would fall under the category of a substantive request, which would not be considered. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I believe the favored nation clause in the contract, if a publisher does want to lower the price, that is permissible, because in the contracts established with the commission and the department, if a lowering of price happens in another state, the publisher is bound to offer at the same price here in Tennessee.
Allison's correct, yes.
The following document is a list of titles that were inadvertently left off the Section B list, and I'm requesting that the commission take a vote to put those onto the Section B list. They were all reviewed and all passed. They were just left off the list. The following tabs contain the screening instruments, and I would like for Dr. Tammy Shelton to come forward and speak to the commission about these.
Tammy Shelton, Department of Education. Good morning. I would like to take just a few minutes and talk you through the screening instruments for Section C that you will be looking at for approval as an action item during the meeting here shortly. So instead of actually talking through them in order, I'm going to skip around just a little bit, so I'll give you time to find each tab, because I want to talk through to where it makes more sense instead of just the order that they're in. So first I would look to talk through the science screening instrument. So your tabs actually have the title. So if we could flip to science, we'll start there. You have an example of a 7th grade science screening instrument. So a couple of things that I want to point out is all the screening instruments have the exact same formatting. So they look very similar when you first look at them, and the differences are really based on the standards, and there's just slight nuances. So first, all screening instruments, not just science, have 2 sections. Section 1 is what we call a non-negotiable, and it's the main things that we really need to make sure that are there in order for a teacher to have the appropriate materials needed to teach the standards to mastery for our students. So the one thing that you're always going to see in Section 1 is the standards, and you're going to be looking for alignment to standards. In science, which is what we're looking at, for example, we want to see 100% of alignment to the standards. We also have embedded the actual language of the standards in this screening instrument, and we do that for most of the subjects. And the reason is because oftentimes as a reviewer, or if I'm in the local district, there may be multiple documents of standards. Maybe I pulled something from a website that says Tennessee Academic Standards, and I may have an inaccurate document in some way where I found an app or something like that. So we really want to make sure that they have the correct language of the actual standards. So we go ahead and take a few extra pages and we embed that language. So you'll see that in all the screening instruments. So section 1 is always 100% alignment for our 4 academic subjects, and you see that here with science. So the first thing that a reviewer would do would look for that non-negotiable. In section 1, there's always a couple of extra criteria. So for example, in science, you're also going to see in section 1 not only looking for 100% of alignment to the standards, you're also going to see focus, rigor, and coherence. Because not only are we looking for alignment to the content of the standards, but we're also looking for alignment to the expectation of the standards. And so for science, you also see that focus, rigor, and coherence. And 100% is what we're looking for. Section 2, which is the is not a non-negotiable, but it's something that we really want to see. And so we ask our reviewers to give detailed notes on Section 2 so that once it's posted online, our local districts can really look at those notes for those what we call extra criteria. So in Section 2 for science, you're looking for, again, going a little bit deeper into rigor and thinking about grade level appropriateness, those sorts of things. Also looking for literacy in science. So what does it look like when I talk about literacy in science? How can I help my students be able to read, write, speak, and listen like a scientist? So the literacy component. You're also going to see student engagement and instructional supports reviewed in this section. Monitoring student progress, so the assessments and how do we monitor that progress of our students, and then teacher supports. And so those are the pieces that you see in Section 2. The program or the textbook, those instructional materials will have to pass Section 1 before they move on to Section 2. So we're looking for that 100% alignment to standards in science. Once a program passes Section 1, then the reviewer would move to Section 2. But if it has not passed Section 1, as you know, through the timeline, we would send the feedback and that program back to the publisher, and they would have an opportunity to address any places to where there are gaps or any missing alignment to standards in Section 1, and the publisher has the opportunity to fix that misalignment and bring it back, and then it would move on if it passed at that point to Section 2. So we stop at the non-negotiables if it doesn't pass. If it does, then we move on to this extra criteria. So that's the layout through all of the rubrics. The Section 1 non-negotiables, you pass that, you move to Section 2. And the science one, literally 100% alignment to standards, focus, rigor, coherence. Once it passes that, we move on to those extra supports for our teachers. Are there any questions about the science screening instrument? Yes.
I'd also like to add that as a part of the training for the advisory panelists, the first thing we do is go through the standards for the materials under review. Then we go through the screening instrument. Then they look at the materials. And we feel that sequence is important because then you don't have a situation in which you're trying to essentially retrofit materials into the screening instrument. So always, again, beginning with the standards, and that's why that timeline that I pointed out is so critical in terms of how things flow.
Susie Bunch, may I ask a question? How many reviewers would review the same publisher, the same textbook?
There are 3 for each science submission and 2 for the other course areas.
And if one of the reviewers rates the textbook very low, the other 2 rate them very high, is there a time for the 3 to come together for consensus, or do you just take the review documents and work that out in the department?
Yeah, so actually in the past, historically, the reviewers did come together to have those discussions, but in 2014, when we had a change in the textbook statute, it actually calls for reviewers to review the textbooks independently. So they do that, and then they submit that electronically to us, and then it actually does that. I will say this, in the last 2 years since we've actually been doing that independent submission based on the new law, we have seen that the reviews always are very close. So very rarely, if I don't know that I can even think of an instant to where we've had a gap in reviews, they've been very close. Now, there are times when that close is right there on the line, and you possibly could have one, and you could have one that it doesn't pass with one reviewer and it does with another reviewer. That's one of the reasons why science, which as you notice has the most bids and is one of our 4 main subject areas that is assessed at the state, has 3 reviewers so that we wouldn't end up with a 50-50 split there. It also states, I believe it is in statute, that it's a majority of the reviewers. So if there is a split, it would go back to the publishers and it would not pass Section 1. So it would take in the subject areas like CTE, for example, to where we only have 2 reviewers. It literally takes both reviewers to pass that program.
But again, that's also why that publisher's appeal is in place as part of the process. So when they get those Section 1 reviews, they can make revisions to the materials and then represent them to the advisory panel.
Any other questions about science?
Kyle Mallory. On the panelists, the reviewers themselves, are their teacher evaluations taken into account? Are you the process of eliminating evaluators? Are teacher evaluations, teacher scores, are they taken into account as well?
So yes, if you will look at, I know that Allison discussed the rubric that we use to score the applications for the reviewers, and part of that on that rubric as well does take into account teachers' evaluation, or if they have individual value-added TVOS, that's taken into consideration. I'm not sure what tab was behind. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's look now at one of the visual art screening instruments, and I'm going to use dance for an example. Everything that I state about the dance rubric would also apply to theater, visual art, and music as well. The dance is actually, I think it's the second screening instrument that you would have. So if you'll remember in science, I stated that Section 1 was the standards, and we were looking for 100% alignment. And some of our other courses were not looking for 100% of alignment for various reasons. So for example, in some of our fine arts courses, it may be that there are things that the teacher would do with those students that's not necessarily going to fit into instructional materials, but it then is aligned with the standards. And in CTE, it's the same way. There may be some things to where they're needing to bring in community, industry, things like that you wouldn't necessarily see in a textbook. So we're not looking towards 100%. We're looking for 80% alignment in these particular courses or standards. So for visual art, it's kind of a combination, all the fine arts, and we're looking at dance, it's a combination of that 80-100 split. So the way that our fine art standards are set up is that there are 4 domains within each of those set of standards, whether it's theater, whether it's visual art, whether it's dance. And those 4 domains are perform, create, connect, and respond. And depending on which discipline you're talking about in visual art, one of those 4 domains is considered the major work of the grade. So, for example, if I'm thinking about dance, out of those 4, perform is the most important. So that's the end product that we would see for dance. Or theater, perform is going to be the major work of the grade. But if I think about visual art and media art, the major work of the grade there is create, because that's the main thing that we're working on is the creation. So depending on which of the disciplines I'm talking about in fine arts, one of those 4 domains becomes major work of the grade. So in all the rubrics for fine arts, the major work of the grade, we want to see 100% of alignment. The other 3 domains, we want at least 80%. So you'll see language there that states that 80% alignment across all standards and 100% alignment for that major work of the grade. So in looking at the dance screening instrument, you'll see that it's laid out very similar to the science. We have non-negotiable first in Section 1, and that's alignment to standards, and then that's focus. And when we talk about the focus there, we're talking about really looking at that 100% alignment for that major work of the grade, and the focus is on that major work and that domain that's the most important for that particular arts discipline. Section 2, for all of the fine arts rubrics, goes into rigor so that we really are meeting the expectations of those standards. And then we go into, and you'll see this is very similar to science, we go into student engagement and instructional supports, monitoring our student progress and what does that look like in our fine arts classes, and then teacher supports for our teachers is also in section 2. Any question about the fine arts rubrics? Yes.
Kelsey Reese. Maybe I'm just not seeing it on here, but how do we know what the focus area of that is? It in that paragraph at the top?
Yeah, so actually, if you'll look at the very top of section 1, it says part A and it says alignment, and it actually gets it actually, if you looked at all of them just by glancing, it looks the same, but the wording's very differently. So in looking at the dance one, it actually explains that there are there are 11 foundations and 4 overarching domains that are listed below, and then it goes into detail and says for dance, the 4 overarching domains are in order: perform, create, respond, and connect. And then it goes on that since perform is listed as the first in the dance standards, it's the major work and focus of the grade. And then it goes on to talk about that when you look for focus, you're looking for focus in the major work of the grade.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so now I would like to flip back and look at CTE, which was your first tab. CTE is alignment at 80%, and that goes along with the standards. So you're going to see for section 1 for CTE that we're looking for 80% alignment of our standards. We're looking for rigor, so the depth and expectation of those standards. And then in CTE in section 1, which is very important, we're also looking for post-secondary and career readiness. So that's section 3 under section 1 there for CTE, that post-secondary and career readiness. Those are the non-negotiables. We want to see 80% in alignment to those standards. And then when you go into section 2 for CTE, you're looking first at the progression of the standards, and so that progression across that course. And then it goes into teacher supports, usability, and assessment, or progress and monitoring your student progress. So you'll see that the teacher supports and monitoring student progress is very similar to science and visual arts. And then the last, we have health and PE. Those are very similar to CTE. You're looking for 80% alignment with your standards. And then in section 2, again, you're looking for those usability pieces, those teacher supports, and those instructional supports. So very similar there as well. We have quite a few screening instruments. We do it per grade level, per course or subject, and they're all posted online at this time. Any questions about our screening instruments?
Hey, Craig Hammond, and I think the screening instruments are really well done in terms of being standards aligned. I think that's really important for teachers across the state to get materials that are so well aligned, really important, and they're going to be able to use them much better. I didn't see on here, as we've done in the past, places to make notes, seeing of sensitivity issues or bias. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and so during the training, of course, Allison had talked about the first thing we do is we train on the standards, and then we go into the screening instrument. And during that training, we will talk about that. And even though their job is to look for alignment to standards, we also want them to, in the notes section, and if you notice, each screening instrument in the last column has a place for evidence, justification, and notes. And we direct the panelists to any time you notice something that could be a bias or sensitivity issue to please note that in that column, so that when the local districts, which it is a local responsibility to really dig deep because each local district has unique needs in their area, that they can read those notes on that.
So their reviews will be permanently on display for districts?
Yes, all reviews from all the panelists are posted online.
We've also, you mentioned the standards and the way the documents created, Dr. Hammond. One thing from the panelists last year, each one of them said at the end of the review that he or she felt as if had a better grasp of the standards and better teaching. So I think one of the really interesting and unique things about this review process is that we're seating so many more panelists this round. That means that many more teachers will be back in classrooms with that heightened understanding of the standards and how the materials align and all of that.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that effort. And to Cal's point, if you're looking at teachers with that high TVAS, those are typically teachers that really know the standards. And if there's other means to gauge who knows standards best, when you have a multitude of applicants, that'll be really important and beneficial.
Yes, and thank you for that comment. And I will say that we had extremely strong applicants, and I know that Dr. Campbell can speak to that. He was at that meeting when we reviewed those. Many of the applicants for science and visual art actually just this past year sat on the standards writing committee. So they had a very deep understanding of the standards even coming into the training that we'll do.
I have a question or a comment, please. Susie Bunch, Dr. Kirk or Dr. Shelton, do you send to the directors of schools a note or a letter telling them about their teachers who have served on this panel, because they need to know what a wealth of knowledge these folks are bringing back to their district? They are walking around knowledgers, how about that for a word? This is embedded professional development just for the people who have served on this review panel. And they need to be acknowledged by the superintendent and their board and used inside their school district and their schools as we move into new textbooks and new standards. So this is very well done. I appreciate it.
Yes, Tammy Shelton, thank you so much for that comment. So so they have to actually, the reviewers in the application process submit two letters of recommendation, and actually we had many directors of schools write the letters as well as principals, but thank you for that, and we will do that because I think that is very important, and we will make sure that we send the information to each director of schools.
It's also, just for the record, the panelists their names and their districts are posted on the department's website. But I think that letter is a great idea, Ms. Bunch. Thank you.
Bill Campbell, I did sit in on the advisory panel reviews. Was most impressed with how comprehensive the application itself was. They have to submit a great deal of information about their background, their qualifications for the screening to take place. So it was well done.
And to circle back to a point that Allison made when she was talking about our sunset hearing follow-up, so the committee did ask the question of how we are ensuring that diversity on these advisory panels. So the panel should consist of expert teachers and experts in the field, and so we sort of outlined the steps that we had taken to ensure that there was wide circulation of these opportunities, but I also wanted to bring it back to the commission and see if you had thought of any suggestions or recommendations for actively recruiting and engaging in your communities to solicit applications from professionals and other experts. And so I wanted to just raise that point again. We will need to return to government operations and report back on what actions we've taken to ensure this diversity, and so I wanted to bring that up.
Kyle Mallory, I'm going to piggyback on Commissioner Bunch. Is there anything that you can do as the Department of Education as far as giving these teachers professional development time? If they're going to serve, give them a little incentive of professional development time, because we have to put in so many hours anyway. So there you go.
Yeah, so this is Tammy Shelton. So yes, I do believe that it is really good professional development, but that would be up to the local district if they chose to accept this as a professional development opportunity. We could definitely state a summary, give information and agendas of what's in the training to let districts know that this actually is 2 days of training and the majority of that is on standards, and we would be fine to provide that information, and then it would be ultimately up to the LEA to make the decision.
I'm going to go back on that. In other words, if the Department of Education encourages a director of schools to do something, especially something as little as this, I bet they're going to do it. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Vicki Kirk, back to Joanna's question about diversity. So we do make an attempt to select from across the state. Is this correct? There's some criteria as we look at our applicants to make sure that we include rural and urban and 3 grand divisions, and there is an effort to select in a way that helps to ensure diversity. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And when we go through the list of panelists, I think you'll see a good spread from the grand divisions and also large, small, rural, urban districts.
One more thing, Kyle Mallory. So the Department of Education couldn't go ahead and give them professional development hours?
Professional development hours are tracked at the local level, and the decisions about professional development is made at the local level.
And the final tab in your binders contains the meeting minutes from the September 26th meeting. We'll take a short break between the workshop and our actual meeting. If you want to review those will be the first items that we, or one of the first items that we vote on, the approval of those minutes. Any additional questions? Okay.
Thank you. We will take a 5, maybe 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene and be underway with our commission meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, so that is what, is that what you were saying? Yeah, so that's what the committee was asking, was how are we ensuring that in addition to educator applicants, we're also getting professionals, people who are working in the field, who may have, up-to-date knowledge on what, job opportunities are available in the field. And so I think they want to make sure that we're recruiting from a wide field, because most of our applicants are educators, and I think part of that is because educators know, alignment to the standards and are aware of the opportunity, but just making sure that we're circulating that.
So are we trying to get people like that for the science option, or would that be?
So we're trying to get additional professionals, so experts who are working currently in the field. Because a lot of educators may have a past experience, so like CTE educators, for instance, if you're teaching a welding class, you probably have a previous experience as a welder, but I think the goal was they wanted to make sure that there were people with up-to-date knowledge of what the markets were like and what the current trends were and so forth. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I am sure I made you
No, you did.
a married tag, and I am so sorry. I blanked. I may have thrown your married self away.
Well, and
it
probably doesn't help that my email is my maiden.
Right.
It's confusing.
Yeah,
I need to
so
change it.
I apologize. How are you? Good. How's Henry County?
Good.
Good. Yeah, Candy and I had a road trip earlier in the year. Yes. And I took a picture by the tower when I was in Paris. Yeah. It was great.
There's like no good way to get there from here.
No, there
You're
isn't.
just out in the middle of nowhere.
But you know what? It was beautiful. It was in the fall, and so I actually took the old Bristol Highway back to Nashville, which was, great. And it was cool to see all those smaller towns across. It was just really neat. Yeah, we had a good time, and they were very hospitable. Yeah, it was lovely. So, that high school is crazy.
No, it is.
Yeah,
They're getting ready to remodel everything.
the weird angles and
Circular, yeah.
circular. Yeah, it was really strange. But we had a great time, and Candy was a hoot to work with. So It was great. I'll come back anytime.
Allison, can I ask you a question real fast?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
No,
A
not
lot
at
of
all.
questions right now, and I was like, so for science, so we're trying to, they want to get to section 1, 100%. And section 2, is it just like we want whoever can hit the most things, or is it like?
Well, that's a good question. So,
Well, thank you, yeah, sorry.
they're in these new work documents, so I'm probably gonna go around the world to answer your question.
Okay,
Bear
I'm
with
sorry
me.
that I just hit you with
it's
that.
nothing with this number.
Okay, well.
So we added something in this review that talks about extraneous materials,
Okay.
because we did not want to have a shotgun approach where a publisher would just
Hit all these.
let me just give you every science book in the world that I have or whatever.
Right.
So that is checked for now. So if there are a bunch of things that should be in a different grade level or should be someplace else,
Right.
that is accounted for in the
Okay.
screener. Section 2, that deals with essentially the sort of the free materials, what back in the day when the earth was cooling and I was teaching, the black line masters and all of those things
Right.
that you would get in the big box.
Right.
And so
Section
it's,
2 is like for teachers, like to help like them like kind of manage that too.
Right.
Like at the beginning.
and also, and this is one of the reasons, I don't know how well you all remember the old screening instruments, but they were essentially check yes or no, which was not very helpful to the publishers if they didn't pass section 1 because they kind of didn't know, well, what am I missing? And it wasn't very
No,
helpful to the districts because, well, so
We
what?
have a
So we
place,
made these
Rock Island.
evidence pieces and notes
Okay.
required.
And we
So
built
that they,
there.
so that the reviewers have to say, okay, it's on page
Right.
42 or
Okay.
whatever.
So I'm
or
up there.
covered in these multiple chapters. So
Even during the winters, winterized, having big
the section
fireplace.
2
I'm up
materials
there
are
usually
more of
from
kind of
Thursday through
the
Sunday,
teacher support,
Monday.
and that becomes
here and
critical
there.
in their comments on
My wife
that,
is,
because a district may have a very
real
specific
engaged
need
in
for
something
something, or
else. She
if
serves,
those materials are super
Tennessee,
technology heavy,
Right.
and they don't have the capacity for
Right.
that, or they do have the capacity
So
for
she's
that,
into
and it
that.
would
Matter
mean
of
the
fact,
difference between choosing publisher A or publisher B.
Okay.
So that's what all of that is about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I could just see, I looked through some of them, I could see where it'd be like,
Go
yeah.
through the
Yeah.
conference. and do
Well,
the
it's,
data on all of it.
we've got,
And then later,
essentially bidding all
hard
kids.
Beth,
And the publisher sent me a
she's
picture
paid her
of
dues,
what
and
that
really
means. And she
worked
said,
hard
so
over the years.
kids, like science
We
kids.
lived in Memphis and I
And
was
so
headmaster
they
in
sent
the
me a
US.
picture, and
She
it
got
was
engaged in the election.
two very large boxes,
Elect-
and a bunch of other
three.
boxes.
Yeah.
For the Senate,
And it
remember
would have
that?
been that times
And then
three.
went to
And so
Alabama.
if you can imagine
She
what
was
the
involved
reviewer
there and
would,
came back home.
I mean, it was, so we came up with a compromise,
She's the kind
you
of
know, for
person
the reviewers to see the materials and how they work and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's just,
They know
I mean,
what
it's
they
a
don't
new,
call.
and it's particularly interesting
She sort of
in science
reached that
that
pinnacle.
we're having
Working.
materials bid in a non-traditional way.
So we're up at, we're up at Rock Island.
Thank you
Away
so
from the
much.
actual book in the back.
Right.
All three of our adult children, their spouses, and grandchildren. So some of them have literally grown up in Rock Island. Here up to,
Yeah, that's great. That's kind of what our family's doing now too. Our little ones, they built it in 09. 2009 is when they built it.
where are they at Rock Island? Which river?
We have to go up river ways to get to our guy. It's, I think Quebec.
Oh, yeah. So you're on the 24th?
You can take this.
And that's the main river.
So I teach biology.
We're on the Rocky River, right here at Camp Fort.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, so you're closer to
And then there's another river, the Colorado, that flows in to the Camp Fort, just above the dam. And below that, where the Camp Fort continues, is Rock Island State Park, but that water eventually forms Central Lake. So do you get up there at all?
a lot in summer.
I just.
I know, I do that all the time, and it's terrible. It's gorgeous. I love that building. Right? I even remember it when it was on my phone. I know. The earth was cooling and it was a high school.
Faculty meeting today. We have an alumni room right next to where we meet, and it's got all this memorabilia history. It has no towel. And it said turn over the towel and meet the date. Etched in there is January 3rd, 1936.
Was it a WPA? Or
CCC, maybe whatever.
Okay, we will prepare for convening our commission meeting now. Good people. This Bill Campbell, chairman of the Tennessee Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. And delighted to see everyone here for our commission meeting. For the record, we are going to go real quick and go through once again and introduce yourself and what your calling may be as a teacher or member of the staff in education. We'll start here.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Nash, and I am from Paris, Tennessee, and I am a K-4 inclusion teacher.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Reese. I'm from Knoxville, where I teach high school special education.
Joanna Collins, Director of Contracts and Staff Attorney for the Department of Education, and I am here to advise and support the Commission.
Delancia Davis, Recording Secretary, Department of Education.
I'm Craig Hammond, Principal Representative from Nashville.
Vicki Kirk, Deputy Commissioner and Chief Academic Officer for the state of Tennessee, and I serve as Commissioner McQueen's designee.
Susie Bunch, Superintendent Representative, Director of Schools, Lexington, Tennessee.
Kyle Mallory, Stewart County.
I'm Allison Gower. I'm Director of Content at the Tennessee Department of Education.
And we're pleased to have Dr. Tammy Shelton here as well. I'll call on Delancia Davis for roll call.
Ms. Bunch,
Present.
Dr. Hammond,
Present.
Mr. Mallory,
Here.
Ms. Nash,
Present.
Ms. Reese,
Present.
Dr. Kirk,
Present.
Dr. Campbell.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you do have a quorum.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize Joanna Collins for some remarks about electing our chair for the year.
Joanna Collins. So under statute, at the first regular meeting of the calendar year, the commission must vote to elect the chair for 1 year. And so the chairman will call for nominations and get a second, and then call for any further nominations. And then we'll take a vote.
We have nominations for someone to serve as chairman of the Textbook Commission.
Mr. Chairman, I nominate yourself to serve another term as our chairman of the commission.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So we go to a roll call vote.
Are there any further
Oh, excuse me. Are there any other nominations? Be happy to receive a nomination. Having heard none, are we ready for the vote?
Ms. Bunch,
Yes.
Dr. Hammond,
Yes.
Mr. Mallory,
Yes.
Ms. Nash,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
and Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
All right, so we have that motion has been passed unanimously.
Thank you, and look forward to working with current members of the commission. I would like, as part of my opening remarks, it might help Allison for you to bring us up to date on the 3 other members of the commission that will probably join us between now and next fall.
At this time, Dr. Campbell, there have been no appointments made.
And that made it extremely important, and I appreciate everybody making the effort to get here so we could have a quorum. We'll now move under consent items on your agenda for the adoption of the agenda, and I would add as amended with the addition of the election of the chair that we just had.
And this, instead of being a consent item, this will require a roll call vote because we are amending the agenda to add an unscheduled item.
Ms. Bunch,
Yes.
Mr. Hammond, Dr. Hammond, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Mallory,
Yes.
Ms. Nash,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
This has been passed unanimously.
Thank you. The next item is approval of the September 26, 2016 meeting minutes. So I'll call on you, Delancia.
All in favor of the approval of September 26, 2016 meeting minutes, say aye. Any opposers, say no.
Aye.
Any opposers? Mr. Chairman, you have 7 ayes.
Thank you, and we now approve the minutes from our fall meeting of the commission. We now move to action items, item number 3 on the agenda, and these will require roll call voting. The first, recommendation of textbook and instructional materials substitutions. Call on Allison Gower.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. This is Allison Gower. As discussed in the workshop, behind tab 2, you have the substitution rule. This rule allows for publishers to submit materials that have been amended. They are then reviewed by a content expert in the department to see if they are usable side by side in the classrooms, and we recommend that these substitutions be approved.
Make a motion to accept.
Thank you, Mr. Mallory. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Dr. Hammond. We'll call for the vote.
All right. Ms. Bunch,
Yes.
Dr. Hammond,
Yes.
Mr. Mallory,
Yes.
Ms. Nash,
Yes.
Ms. Reese, CTE, Fine Arts, Science, Health, Wellness, and PE. These screening instruments have the standards embedded in them, and these are the instruments that will be used by the advisory panelists to evaluate the materials.
Make a motion to accept.
Thank you, Mr. Mallory. We have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We'll call for the vote.
Ms. Bunch,
Yes.
Dr. Hammond,
Yes.
Mr. Mallory,
Yes.
Ms. Nash,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
This
this has passed unanimously.
Thank you. Item C refers to the panelist review. I had the good fortune of attending that meeting and was impressed with the quality of the applicants to serve as panelists as well as those who came in to screen them. Ms. Gower, do you have additional comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you will look behind tab 3 toward the end of that section, you will see the finalists for the advisory panels for science, CTE, PE, wellness and health, and fine arts. As I mentioned in the workshop, these panelists went through a rigorous application process. Their submissions were reviewed by content experts at the department, and with Dr. Campbell participating in that process as the member of the commission.
Mr. Mallory?
Again, Ms. Gower's done a good job in the workshop explaining these issues. I make that motion.
We have a second.
I'll second Mr. Mallory's motion. Susie Bunch.
Thank you, Ms. Bunch. Call the roll.
Ms. Bunch,
Yes.
Dr. Hammond,
Yes.
Mr. Mallory,
Yes.
Ms. Nash,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
All right, this has passed unanimous.
Item D is deals with the publisher bid correction policy 22.500. I'll call on Joanna Collins. Dr. Collins.
Joanna Collins, Staff Attorney, Department of Education. Tennessee Code Annotated 496-2203 establishes a bid filing deadline of on or before 10 a.m. on the day designated for the call of bids. During each adoption cycle, the Office of Content and Assessment Design, which supports the work of the Textbook Commission, receives a number of requests from publishers to revise incorrect or inaccurate bids. These requests are frequently received after the bid filing deadline and range from substantive requests, corrections to prices, to non-substantive requests, corrections to ISBN. In May of 2016, our office issued a memo to publishers participating in the CTE Section B adoption cycle, outlining general guidance for how the office would consider requests for bid corrections. At the September 2016 meeting, the Commission discussed formalizing this process into policy. And so we have drafted a policy, and the Department of Education staff and legal counsel recommend acceptance of this item on first reading, and you will find it in Section 4 of your binders. And as Mr. Mallory noted during the workshop, one correction is that that we will consider substantive requests of lowering costs, but not adjusting costs that would raise costs.
Any questions? Mr. Mallory?
Do we need to make an amendment to that?
Yes, so I believe that we should vote on it as amended to add the note that we will consider requests to lower the bid in alignment with the favored nations clause. So we will vote to approve the policy as recommended with this amendment.
I'd like to make a motion. We approve this policy as amended. If a publisher would like to lower the cost, so be it.
Thank you, Mr. Mallory. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Call for the vote.
Ms. Bunch,
Yes.
Dr. Hammond,
Yes.
Mr. Mallory,
Yes.
Ms. Nash,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
This has passed unanimously.
Thank you. If you'll turn to the second page of your agenda, item E, Ms. Gower, adjustment to Section B approved list.
Behind tab 4B, you have an adjustment to the section B approved list. These are materials that were reviewed and passed the screening process for section B, but were inadvertently left off the list. I ask that the commission accept them and that we add them to the list.
Ms. Bunch?
Oh, I was going to make a motion. We approve.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor to approve.
I'll second.
Second from Mr. Mallory. Call for the vote.
Ms. Bunch,
Yes.
Dr. Hammond,
Yes.
Mr. Mallory,
Yes.
Ms. Nash,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Dr. Kirk,
Yes.
Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
Dr. Campbell, this has passed unanimously.
Thank you. Now we go to Roman numeral 4 on your agenda, presentations, acknowledgement of section C bids. Ms. Gower?
If you will turn to the last page behind tab 4, this is a summary of the bids that we received for section C. The actual bids are posted online and also were sent to commission members electronically. I will read the publisher's name and the total titles bid. Accelerate Learning, 12 titles. Achieve 3000, 3 titles. Activate Learning, 3 titles. Bedford Freeman and Worth, 4 titles. Pasco Scientific, 1 title. Carolina Biological Supply Company, 9 titles. Cengage Learning, 8 titles. CPO Science School Specialty, 2 titles. Davis Publications, 12 titles. Discovery Education, 13 titles. EMC Publishing, 1 title. Goodhart Wilcox, 4 titles. Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, 13 titles. Human Kinetics, 1 title. Learned Notebooks, 5 titles. Learning Bits Incorporated, 3 titles. McGraw-Hill School Education, 46 titles. Pearson Education Publishing as Prentice Hall, 28 titles. Perfection Learning, 1 title. Quaver Music, 10 titles.
Do we have a motion to acknowledge that the list of bids has been, of textbooks have been provided for us and now need approval?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Mr. Mallory? How about a second?
I'll second Vicki Kirk.
Thank you, Dr. Kirk.
I don't think it's necessary that we do a roll call since it's just an acknowledgement. I think we can just do a voice vote.
That's fine.
We'll have a voice vote on this proposal. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? It passes. Thank you. Under item Roman numeral 5, I'll call on Ms. Gower for announcements, notices about upcoming schedule and meeting dates.
We need to decide on our September meeting dates. Those meetings are usually around the 15th, and then again, 10 days to 2 weeks after that. I'd be happy, we can do that here and now, or if the commission wants to email available dates to me, we can do it that way.
What's the pleasure of the commission? Do we want to try to set a date now, or let's give it a run?
Okay. And I think the commission's preference is to meet Mondays at 10 o'clock. Is that right? So
Yes.
we're looking for 2 Mondays at 10. Let me get a calendar.
We have suggested Monday, the 18th of September.
Got a motion
and
for the
25th.
18th and the 25th. Is that right, Ms. Bunch? I'll make a motion to 18th and 25th. Ooh, that's two Mondays back to back, though. You have to have 10 days between those, correct?
I'll ask Ms. Collins to check if there's a rule about the length between the two dates.
How about 11th and 25th? No, you're in the meeting.
Fourth is Labor Day.
There was a conflict with the 11th.
What about the 25th of September and October 2nd? I'm sorry, the 18th and October 2nd.
That look good for everyone on your calendars, at least for now. Mr. Mallory,
Do we need a motion or just do it?
go ahead.
I'll make the motion for the 18th and then October 2nd.
Let's go ahead and vote. We don't really need a motion, but just since we're into the groove, let's go. Who has a second for those dates? October, excuse me,
I'll second those dates.
thank you. Be the 18th of September and October the 2nd. Mark your calendars.
I'm not sure.
Well, I certainly hope so. We need to work hard to get our governor and let's see, the other two would be Speaker of the House and the Chairman of the Speaker of the House and Lieutenant Governor. Thank you. Okay, under other business, I want to bring to the attention of the commission that this coming year, 17th and 18th, we're going to be shifting to social studies standards. Now keep me on track here, Allison. The Department of Education, the Social Studies Standards Recommendation Committee, the SRC, met this past fall, and this spring they'll be presenting new standards to the state board for a first reading. According to my calendar, that's spring of the 17th. And then we move forward to the state board taking revisions and then finalizing these standards this summer. I'm getting a nodding head from Tammy. So my point is, if you have an interest in going back and looking at the opportunities for the public to have input on those standards, and you want to follow this, we encourage you to do so. And because this coming series, as we all know, is going to be very important. If you haven't had the opportunity, as I suggested before, to get a little history on social studies textbooks, pay a visit to the collection of all these textbooks at MTSU. Great staff there. You can take the books and look them over. But the standards that are approved by the Department of Education are those standards that we are going to be responsible for measuring as far as the textbooks are concerned. That's our job. Now, help me out if I've gone astray. Tammy?
Tammy Shelton, the department. You are correct. The social studies standards are currently under review with the Standards Recommendation Committee, which is a body of 10 individuals that are also appointed by our Lieutenant Governor, Speaker of the House, and Governor as well. They're reviewing those standards. They will go to State Board first read April, second read this July. And so you are welcome to, if you would like to go back and review those again, to contact State Board of Education. So the one thing I will say is, it's your last comment, is that those standards are approved by the State Board of Education, not the department. And of course, those are also open board meetings as well.
Who's taking Ms. Mallory? Who's taking the lead from the department on those new standards?
So our department, the Content and Assessment Design team, our team will work with districts to implement as those roll out. Those standards will roll out in the 2019-2020 school year. So one of the reasons that standards are adopted a little bit earlier, usually 2 years in advance of when they're actually implemented in the classroom, is because your work that you do as this commission, it takes about 18 months to actually get a book on the list. And then at the same time, we're also aligning our assessments as well, and that takes about 18 months as well. So it will be a couple of years before they're implemented in the classroom.
So who's taking the lead in the department?
So our team, my team, Tammy Shelton, the team that Allison Gower sits on, we help districts with the implementation of those standards. We also have other teams at the department as well, so it depends on which piece you're talking about. So as far as helping districts with instructional materials and textbooks, that's our team. As far as answering questions about standards, that's our team. But we have a training team at the department that will work on training, and that's a different team. So if you do have any questions, you're welcome to contact me, and I'll make sure that the appropriate person at the department gets your questions.
But you also had a standards writing team that was made up of teachers and higher education and experts in the field who have spent the time to create the standards and have those standards vetted from all across the state before they were ever introduced to the state board for approval.
Exactly. So I was referring to after the standards had passed. Thank you for that clarification. So yes, there were a group of Tennessee educators, including higher education, that worked on the revision of those standards. There also was 2 different opportunities for public comment. There was an open web page that any constituent, not only in Tennessee, but wherever, anybody could go on this public website and leave comments on the current standards. And then that team of writers went back and made revisions based on the feedback from the first web posting and their content knowledge and their knowledge of students in the classroom. Then it was posted a second time for more feedback. So the standards have went through a pretty lengthy process with public feedback and writers. Once they pass state board in July, then the department will pick up the reign at that point to help districts with implementation.
Dr. Shelton, was that the Social Studies Standards Recommendation Committee chaired by Jason Roach? Is that the...
No, so Jason Roach actually sits on that committee, but it is chaired by Todd Wigington from Metro School System. But Jason does sit on that committee.
Thank you.
And just also as a point of clarification, Dr. Campbell, the work of the commission will wrap up with the Section C reviews and those materials in our September meetings, and the review of social studies and the attendant subjects, law, public safety, et cetera, which are in Cycle D, will actually begin in 2018.
Thank you. Anything else to come before our commission? Mr. Mallory.
Got one. Hang on. Let me find it real quick. In the policies, section 1. Where is it? Hang on. Section 1, in the Textbook and Instructional Material Commission, it's Part 1 under A. It says, talking about the speakers and everything in that policy. One of the things that I think that first year that we had a couple of members of the legislature that attended one of our meetings, and they weren't recognized. And I think that we need to put in this policy, if a legislator, a rep, or a state senator comes in here, that we need to be able to recognize them if they want to speak or something. So that would be a recommendation for me as a policy of this board.
I would think that if we do have and know that there's a representative or senator here, we could certainly acknowledge their presence. Dr. Shelton?
Yeah, this is Tammy Shelton again. So the section in what you just looked at and quoted is actually in statute, which this commission nor the department can actually make a change to. But thank you, Dr. Campbell, for stating that y'all would recognize.
I think it would be incumbent upon any of us, if we realize that there is a representative or a senator or any member of the legislature that we know that's sitting in the audience, that we would let the chair know that they are there for a recognition.
As a courtesy, thank you. Anything else?
And we are speaking of just recognizing the people in the room not speaking.
Yes.
And statute says they can't speak. Is that what I'm being told?
This is Tammy Shelton with the department. No, what Allison Gower was clarifying was your question. So if an individual would like to speak at the commission, they actually send in notice, and then the chairman would review that request to speak, and they have to do that 10 days prior to the meeting for a request to speak. Of course, this commission can acknowledge anybody in the room at any point that they would like to.
And I believe anyone who wants to speak at the commission on whatever topic we're covering is a 15-day notice, so that we can make sure that they are recognized and will be called forth to speak.
So the policy states that if you wish to speak at the meeting, that you will provide this 15 days notice, and it says, no person, committee, or delegation not on the agenda shall be heard unless recognized by the chairman. Speakers will be given a time limit as determined by the secretary of the commission in consultation with the chairman. So individuals may submit a request at least 15 days in advance, and they will not be heard at the meeting unless they have either done that or unless they are recognized by the chairman, according to policy 1.400 textbook commission meetings rules of order.
Any other items come before us today? I want to thank all of you for being here so that we could conduct a business. I think we've had a good meeting, and would wish you well as you travel back to your homes and to your work. And we'll be in communication with you throughout the spring and summer, and look forward to coming back together next fall. Thank you. We are adjourned.